other than like someone at the podium, you can barely hear them.
No, they're coming up. Are we?
Someone at the podium.
Yes, is it back up and?
Be good to go. Ready to go. If it starts to get really staticky, turn this dial over, it should look a little better.
Okay. We're back. I think we're back.
Yeah, it just kind of logged off there.
Did you hit your button? Okay.
So where's the Zoom picking up the sound from?
The Zoom is picking up the sound from the microphones, like the whole echo of the room.
So it's just there's a mic, is it that mic there, or is there another mic that it's picking?
It's the mic, yeah, right now.
Okay, so that's why it's difficult to hear, because it's only
Yeah.
going into that mic, so that's the issue, so use the mic, speak up, and they might be able to hear you on.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Moving on.
Next on our agenda, pumpkin composting at the first farmers market of this month. Was a record.
It was a smashing success. Thank you. 4.55 tons on November 6th. Libby was there working, right? Yes. Briefly. I wasn't going to say briefly. I was just going to say Libby was there working.
I was
You were. Excellent. We appreciate it. So good time was had by all. A successful event, one we look forward to continuing in the future. Thanks also to Collective Resources for their assistance in the event as well.
What did we do last year?
I figured somebody was going to ask me that.
No.
Less than that. I'll look it up and send it to you. Chris asked by how much we smashed the record of last year. I will have to send that figure out to you all, but it was by a lot.
That works.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to new business. At last week's meeting of the village board, our sustainability plan was approved.
Oh.
Do you have something to say?
I will always have something to say. If you ask me to speak, I'm trained to speak. So yes, the sustainability plan was presented to the village board at a special meeting on November 14th. It then came back to the village board for consideration and approval on November 21st. So yes, we're very pleased that have the plan, Skokie's second plan approved. So what comes next in terms of that plan is actually item C. So if you want to talk about implementation, we can, or we can talk about item B, which is the waste committee component of that discussion, which also went to the village board on both of those meeting nights. And we'll get into a little more detail on the implementation plan, however you want to do it. Want me to talk about implementation now or divert off into the solid waste component for a moment?
I mean, implementation really touches on both of those. So.
Yeah,
It's different, obviously,
we will talk about all of it.
Right.
Yes.
it doesn't, whatever order.
Okay. Why don't we let's just stick to the order because I have my scribble on the agenda in that order. So additionally, along with the sustainability plan presentation by Ted Redmond of Pale Blue Dot, who led the planning team in putting together the sustainability plan at both of those meetings, the village board also considered the sustainability Commission's Waste Subcommittee recommendations, and most specifically, and to the point, at the November 21st Village Board meeting, the board did approve transitioning from twice a week refuse collection service to once a week refuse collection service, and also endorsed the subcommittee's recommendation with respect to enhancing food scrap collection in Skokie. The subcommittee's recommendation to the board that night was to pursue the establishment of drop-off collection locations in Skokie, as well as exploring incentives and ultimately providing some form of incentive. And Jim or Jenny, you each were there and spoke at one of the two of those meetings. Jenny was there at the 21st. Jim was there for both the 14th and the 21st. To provide some form of incentive to boost participation in the current collective resources collection program, which is a front of the house collection program, right? Not exactly curbside, but it is a program that we have in place with an existing provider. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Jim, or do you want me to talk about it? Whoever's got the best microphone, and tell me how much detail we need to go into it. I mean, those of us that have been involved at a subcommittee level know some of the ins and outs of it, but if it's beneficial to anybody else to hear any of that, I'd be happy to talk about it.
You know, I'm just gonna briefly try to sum it up. So the last time we met and talked about it, I think we talked about the 3 different levels. What was cost being the pickup, the middle being some sort of curbside, and at the top end, kind of like all in, everybody gets a tote, and we contract with like Lakeshore Recycling or some similar outfit. And where we ended was the drop-off locations and kind of a less costly version of a village-wide, village-sponsored, village-paid-for program, i.e. we would try to bolster the program that Collective Resources has currently. We would, the village would subsidize that program, and we would try to grow that program. But also considering that at some point in time, you know, hopefully the program grows, and then we can maybe at some point switch to a bigger program with a provider like Lakeshore Resources. So kind of encompass.
Yeah,
What we talked about.
I think so.
It's grow it now, you know, from the small little program it is right now. Collective Resources has about 400 participants right now. We want to take that and grow it.
Right.
And quadruple it in size. And even if we did that, that still wouldn't cost justify the other option we were looking at as far as, you know, what a Lakeshore LRS was going to charge for that. So we couldn't justify that, but I think we're at the point where we're just saying, let's grow current program that Collective Resources has, put money into that, put money into education and communication, because we wanted to have money. We can't grow this without communication and education. So that was a very important part of the presentation to me, I thought.
Yes.
That's also a crucial component that can't be.
Right. So those were the 2 specific items of the subcommittee's recommendation that were presented to the board. The other 2 elements of the subcommittee's recommendation to the board when it was made a number of months ago related to communication or enhanced communications, as well as a sustainability coordinator or sustainability type position being created for the village. During the discussion at the November 21st board meeting, that was discussed at least during the Q&A with the board. So the board did not take a formal action with respect to those 2 items. I would just note for those that didn't hear that discussion or who haven't sort of followed along, if you will, with anything that's happened in that regard, The village in the budget process last year did hire an additional communications position. And Meredith Goya is her name, and she's joined the village in the last few months. And basically, as soon as she started with the village, started helping us push out additional public information and marketing information with respect to a lot of our waste programs and other programs. So we think some of the communication investment, if you will, that was part of that recommendation sort of has been made and is spooling up and is ongoing. With respect to the sustainability position, again, the board didn't take a position on that, but I would expect there's going to be some discussion of that as the board and the staff work into the budget process this spring. There were questions asked about it by members of the village board, and I don't think that's something that's going to be forgotten. It was just not a specific recommendation that was included for the board's action that evening. So it was certainly referenced as an implementation item in the sustainability plan, though. So it has popped up in a couple of different areas of the board's discussion that night. So with respect to implementation on those recommendations, there is not as of yet an implementation timeline for a transition from twice a week to once a week. I would say that the direction that the board gave on the 21st is what I would consider to be strategic direction. Now we need to take that direction as a staff and work towards those details of, okay, how do we effectuate this transition? When do we effectuate this transition? And obviously a service transition like that, we won't rush into, and we need to, make sure it's well thought out, and probably most importantly, well articulated to the community to bring them along. So we are actively looking at our options for how we will set up, routing to do that. And then also, as we have discussed in this commission a few times, the village has a recycling contract with Lakeshore that comes up next spring. We are getting ready to go to the marketplace into a negotiating posture with respect to those services. So as part of this, we'll be considering what all of the village's options for that may look like. So that's a very active discussion. So more to follow with respect to that. Had a discussion this afternoon with the village manager with respect to that. So that will be an iterative discussion, but it's a discussion that's ongoing. So I can't give you a date. I can't give you a target date yet, but I would expect it will be before the beginning of the next fiscal year for the village, which is May 1st. So somewhere in there, and the transition time period for the end of the recycling contract with Lakeshore, as a reminder, is May 31 of next year. So definitely more to follow on that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just a quick question, because I read something, I think it was on the Tribune's website, they wrote an article about that might, and then there was something, a blurb in there about Skokie saying that'll be implemented in the spring. That's what the article said.
Okay.
It didn't say where this info came from, but it just said, trash will be going on a once a week in the spring.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that would have come from. I mean, I know there was a reporter scurrying around here talking to people that were talking to residents that were making public comments that night. I never spoke to the reporter, nor did Liz. So I don't know if they were just reading the tea leaves of some of what they thought they heard or what, but no, but I appreciate you calling that to my attention. I skimmed the article, but I didn't see that reference. So implementation and next steps. So let me tell you a little bit about how we see things. So with the plan done, it's kind of as we had earlier here, it's a hooray moment, right? We've been working on this. We did the GHG study last year. We kicked off and did this planning effort, which, as again, for those that were involved in it, was pretty intensive. And now we've done the plan. So what's next? Well, for this group, I think it's important for you guys to dive into the plan. If you haven't, I don't want to presuppose that you all have sat down and read it in detail, or maybe I should say, I will presuppose that you've all cracked down and read it in detail. I think we need to be prepared when we next meet, and we'll discuss that at the end of this meeting, to sit down and talk at our next meeting in earnest about what the work plan will be. So I need for the members to review the plan sectors, and the strategies and actions, and be prepared for that discussion, because we need this group to have a work plan now. I will tell you that at a staff level, we have already assembled a sustainability action team. We have already taken the plan with its, I believe, 8 sectors. We have sector leaders, as well as secondary sector leaders for each of the plan sectors. We have had our first meeting chaired by the village manager. At the first meeting, the ongoing chairpersons of this staff committee is Nick Wyatt, who's the assistant village manager, and myself. And then we have these primary team leaders and secondary team leaders in all of the sector areas, and then additional village department directors as team resources to support all of those teams. We will be expected to have each of those sector teams to have had their initial sector team meetings and be ready for a regathering and reporting back by December 15th. And by December 29th of this year, all of those sector teams are to have identified their quarterly work plan goals for next year, with that quarter beginning in the calendar year and not our fiscal year. So that's January 1. So I say that to you to say that the village and the person of the village manager takes now the approval of the sustainability plan very seriously. And there's a momentum for the village now to move forward and start effectuating these planning strategies and action steps. So we as a staff are on what I consider to be a pretty aggressive path forward. So I say that to you to say, I think we will know by December 29th, and frankly, I'll have an idea by December 15th, where I think the 8 sector teams are going to prioritize some things as they see their work plans or work priorities within these sectors. I will definitively know by December 29th what their quarterly plans are for the next year. So I would like to be in a position where, to the greatest degree we can try and sync up our knowledge of what the staff is initially identifying that they're going to work on with then what we think as a commission our work plan may look like. For those of you that are, well, doesn't matter if you're familiar with the plan or not, I'll tell you, Charlie will know what I'm talking about, and Jenny. When you look at the plan and you look at some of the action steps in there, you will see a phasing indicated on the side in the right-hand column that says phase 1, 2, 3. That generally means if it's a phase 1, that it's the next 2 to 3 years or shorter term type of action. So that might, as you start to look at this, that might suggest a good starting point for action steps. But just beware that just because an item is a phase 2 or a phase 3 strategy or action step, just because it may have a longer time period to come to full fruition does not mean, though, that you should discount beginning to work on it now. It just may mean it's a bigger, more ambitious thing, but you may in fact want to start working on that now because it may take longer to come to fruition. Because remember, many of these steps in this plan are designed to be accomplishments by 2030. So keep that in mind as you start looking at this. Bear in mind as well that we will also be looking at what the other commissions' opportunities are to also effectuate their steps in the plan. I'm sure somebody will ask me a question about what that looks like. I don't know the exact answer to that yet. I think a lot of that will be probably staff driven out of what our own staff implementation team does as we begin to identify our work plan, because much of that is going to, I'll use the expression, spill over to a commission's work. Obviously, there will be many things that will happen in the community development realm, for example, and Johanna will have a lot of work items that will come within building, zoning, and land use and those things that will then fall out to as they move along her various boards and commissions. So that's the charge that I see for this group. I will quit talking for a while and see questions, comments that you all have.
So with the last plan, it, at least from our perspective, really seemed like it was driven by us. In each year, we kind of roadmap what we want to tackle for this year, short term, long term. We set how how it will be implemented every year, each year. But with this task, team that has been assembled, they're doing a lot of that stuff that we had only done before. So just wondering how you envision our role with staff who's also doing the same thing. Because when we do it, it's just, well, this is what we think we should do. We work more on the education piece of this. But as far as kicking things to do, some staff is also doing that.
Yeah, there has been commentary made, I think at the board level, and I look at Ralph and he can tell me yes or no when I get done saying this, about reporting back. And I think maybe some of you have made the same comment about when will we hear back, or how frequently will we hear back from the staff about sort of progress reporting as we go along. And so I think you guys are we're gonna obviously have to work together, and we're gonna have to keep you apprised of what the staff work plan is like. And that's good. I think, as I said, I'm co-chair of like the whole thing. So I'll be in a position to know what everybody's work plans are. And so we'll be able to feed you sort of that information at whatever frequency you want, basically, whether that's quarterly or 6 months, whatever it is. I mean, we meet monthly, so we can feed you that information on what all the sectors work plans are. I mean, what I would like to do is see this commission identify some that it can take and run with, whatever those may be. I mean, we have always been a commission that's had different subject matter expertise and interest areas from amongst the commissioners. And I don't necessarily propose in any way to change that. I think you all still have different passion areas, I'll call them, or expertise areas, where you're going to see some things within different sectors of the plan that you are really driven to work on. I would expect that to continue. So I just hope to be able to like bring it all together, and so we all know what each other is doing.
I had a quick question, and Andrew raised his hand there, but from the last plan, we set up subcommittees to look at various areas. And I was thinking a similar kind of thing with the sectors. Is there going to be an opportunity to have sort of a direct liaison with the staff sector teams?
I would think so. I mean, I don't know why not. I mean, you have certainly done that very effectively in the past with, some of the interest areas that you have with Carrie and Steve when they were both here. And so, yeah, I would think we'd be able to do that.
I think that would be helpful, just, to pick an area and maybe, have regular communication with the sector teams.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Andrew?
Yeah, not to harp on the issue or anything, but since we are discussing kind of now that the plan has officially been approved, and we're discussing sort of more the implementation, do we have any idea of if and when a website that sort of charts the goals and objectives of the plan and where we are relative to those goals and objectives, when something like that will be up and accessible to the public? Because I think that hopefully, at least ideally, something like that would be also available from the beginning, I assume. I don't know if there's been any discussion about that any further. But obviously it would be nice to have that information all kind of clear, concise communication that's accessible to the public at any time that they might be interested. That would be nice if that's accessible. So is there any news on that front, or?
If Liz was here, she would probably know the news on that front, but she is not here, so I apologize that I do not have that, but I will get it and send it out to all the members.
Yeah, and I assume, obviously, I would imagine that there wouldn't be updates or changes necessarily to something like that on a daily or weekly or potentially even monthly basis. But it would be nice for it to be updated, at least, again, from my perspective. Others may have their view on it as far as what's feasible. But I would think quarterly then, based on what it sounds like, quarterly updates would be a good thing to be posted there on that publicly accessible site as well. So that not only do we have some idea of where we are, but anybody, again, who might be interested in the community has an idea of where we stand relative to the goals and objectives set forth in the plan also. So I don't know if there's any feeling about that, but.
Okay, can you hear me? Education is one of those cross-cutting actions at the end of the plan. How is that part of each sector's activity?
Good question. Nick and I have had a conversation last week about that, and I think that's probably a discussion topic for our meeting on the 15th. We talked about that, and I have a feeling there could be either a new resource identified to serve all of the sector teams, that is education, or some alternative to that, because the marketing and public information piece has been identified to service sort of in that role for all the sector teams, but more specifically to education. The way we have the sector teams set up internally right now, we don't have specifically the education piece identified, and we've identified that as a deficiency already that we'll talk about on the 15th.
Yeah,
So
because
that's an excellent observation.
Yeah, it came up quite a bit in all of the whole process. And I think it's really critical that be emphasized. And
Yeah, great point.
Lisa has a question in the chat.
Yeah, I put my question in the in the chat. So the last time I viewed the plan was when it was in draft form. And so I'm wondering, where's that? Is there a checklist that Ted Redmond mentioned would be used for approving new businesses, new construction? Remember, one of the biggest concerns we all had was, how do we involve sustainability with things like the Carvana and the Amazon? And the trustees felt like they had no way of enforcing or recommending or requiring sustainable things. And so I thought the whole purpose of this plan was to be able to do that. And one of the things was going to be that checklist. So does that exist, and where do we find it?
Charlie, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, well, we talked about that, and then I put together sort of a pilot checklist idea and talked to Matt and Carrie about that, and then now neither one of them are here. And then it kind of got that kind of got put on hold, but I think that would be a good idea to revive that effort. So I'm not sure what the best next step for doing that would be. Now that we have the checklist that I was working on was based on it was more of a hypothetical thing, and I was using some of the lead criteria as items in a checklist, but obviously we're not necessarily doing lead certification or lead compliant kind of requirements, but we do have requirements that are identified in the plan that can certainly be organized in a checklist kind of way.
But instead of having like Charlie reinvent the wheel, which I know he's been working on something like this for a long time, but maybe I misheard Ted Redmond, but I thought he said that they had them for other municipalities and that he was preparing one for us. Did I hear incorrectly? Or
I do remember he mentioned that there were other municipalities that had them. I did not recall that he was preparing one for Skokie. I think it was that these are models that could be emulated for Skokie. So, but I may have heard that. You know, I don't know. I can't say for certain it was one way or the other that he had one that we could adapt, or whether he was preparing one.
Yeah, let me check with him, Lisa. He had prepared a checklist type of form for us. Excuse me. But it wasn't super specific or detailed with respect to development. It was, in my opinion, it was more applicable to any one of a number of actions or items that might be sent to a board, a commission, or the village board that asked for the staff people submitting the item to identify or articulate how the item proposed for board consideration responded to the goals or strategies in the sustainability plan. So that checklist, I know that he had developed or riffed off of somebody else's and provided to us. I don't know that he provided one to us that was super detailed on development, but let me go back and check on that.
Would that be something that has to go to the planning commission for them to kind of review and see how they want to adopt?
I guess potentially. I don't know. It would depend on what it would include and how far reaching, right? So, but yeah, we'll get information on that.
well, hopefully it could be something that can be presented to people who want to develop here. And then they can see, instead of handing them our entire plan and saying, make sure it's a huge plan, and saying, make sure your business fits in with this. It's just something workable to give to businesses that would also be workable, be usable and practical for all the commissions when they're deciding to approve zoning, appearance, everything.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that, Lisa.
Thank you.
Emily and
Hey everyone. So Max, thank you for providing that summary and the sort of steps on implementation. Just coming back to the sustainability coordinator, do you think that is that something that like you would plan on request that position in the next budget cycle, like in March, so just in a couple months, or do you think that that would be later? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I fully understood, what your thoughts were on that, timing wise. Yes.
In normal circumstances, it would go through the budget process, which would be, we haven't set the budget calendar yet, so that's the only reason I'm hedging. I'm not hedging in the normal sense, I'm hedging in that sense. Would be somewhere in the February, March range for hearings before the board and approval in May. With respect to this position, the direct answer is I don't know. If the village would consider doing something that's quicker than that or not, I don't know the answer to that yet.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just wondering if it was something that was going to wait a year or two, or if that would be something that would, that was more immediate in that sense. And it sounds like it is the latter.
No, my sense is it will be discussed before a year or two. I mean, I don't know that. Don't take my comment to presuppose the answer is going to be yes, but I think a discussion
Yeah.
and the decision will get made a lot sooner than that. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Andrew, is that a new question?
Yeah, I just I didn't want to interrupt anybody, so that's why I wanted to wait a moment so other people can ask their question. But a kind of follow up to the earlier question, again, because obviously so much of the plan, as we say, in the plan, and as was mentioned, I think at our previous meeting, there's this idea of implementation is for everyone. We're asking the public to be involved, whether it's residents or business owners. And obviously, I think it's important for them to be able to follow along. So aside from the actual when is the site going to be up that would allow people to track where we are relative to the goals and objectives, is there any idea of how frequently that website would be updated? As I said a moment ago, I think quarterly would not be too much from my perspective. I don't know, what the village staff may feel or what anyone else is feeling maybe about it, obviously, here tonight. But I do think that quarterly would probably be a doable thing. And it sounds like that kind of is kind of in sync, I think, with the way that this is going to be worked on. So do we know how frequently that might be updated as well?
Well, the short answer is no, we don't. I think that we need to give it some thought. You raise a great point. The 2015-16 plan talked about the importance of everybody in the community playing a role. This plan talks about the importance of everybody in the community playing a role. So you're right. Public awareness, public participation, public action, and I don't mean public in a broad sense. I mean public as in an everybody sense. Doing something is important, right? So yes, we need to look at the ability to put information on the website. And yes, we need to look at the ability to update that information. But I really think a more important discussion than that probably is how do we have more active communication and engagement that actually furthers the goal of actually changing people's behavior and getting them to do something. Sometimes I think a website and an updating is kind of a passive endeavor. It sits there for people who want to seek it out. I think we need to think about more than that, but
Well,
yes, no, I mean, I don't have an answer to how frequently the update will be, but if we're talking about doing quarterly reporting or regular updates to this commission on activities, I don't know that I see the issue with updating that sort of information as well. I just point out that I think the bigger and perhaps more important challenge is how to do more and engage more.
yeah,
And I think that's where education comes in.
I agree.
It's not just do this, do that, but how to get involved. How can you help? What can you do?
yeah, I mean,
Not a passive education.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It's, we had some discussions in the planning process and sometimes you feel like people want to look at an entity like ours sometimes and say, what are you doing about this? And that's all fair and good. And I understand that. But the point of saying things like this involves everybody is I accept the fact that you look at me and ask what I'm doing, but you also need to talk about what you're doing, what you're prepared to do, because it's not just words when we say everybody has a part to play in this. So,
well,
Something along the lines of that, Andrew, if I could sort of address, follow up on what Max is saying. I've been working with Cub and over in Skokie, and we actually, something we've been working on a while was Cub has been pushing a decarbonization program, and they asked if we would host a meeting. We've set up a public meeting in the library in January. And that was set up prior to the plan being approved, but it did come up in conversation, would there be any subsequent meetings? I think the person at the library asked that. I thought this might be an opportunity to set up like a regular series of meetings that would be hosted by SEAC, that one would be an opportunity to give people an update on where things are with the plan or what the actions are, but also to pick out specific items in there to have some sort of further information about what people can do and what it means, what the implications are for people in the village. And we can, it could be we could have a person who speaks to it from a subject matter expert point of view. They have some expertise in the area, and then there can be some feedback opportunity for people to share their experiences or maybe their concerns, or ask questions specific to what they would be interested in hearing. So I think that's something we can look into and just create a series and have a quarterly series, and just be something we can schedule in advance.
yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, you had emailed, or we'd seen your email about the public, sessions that I know you wanted to talk about with the library. And, your suggestion about tacking on one to just present on the environmental plan is the same time, Nick and I had the conversation about the education role and our recognition that, that piece is missing. And we have to rethink that, because as we've now beaten it in the ground a little bit. I think that's important, and we have to reach people.
I mean, I definitely think, like, I helped do one of the like gardening things, at the library in 2018, and I think that seemed to be well received. And I think there've been others that seem to have been well received in the past that were done sort of in partnership with the library or wherever else. And I do think that those things seem to go over pretty well. So I do think something like that would be a different topic. A series where there's a different topic each time, and somebody who can really come at it from, like you're saying, I think, an expert perspective. I think in terms of the presenter, that would be I think that is could be a good way of reaching people. So But yeah, I also I didn't want to, interrupt, but what I was kind of thinking too is, for something like that, is there a possibility also of finding a way to like create, maybe if people would be interested, like getting email addresses, and kind of that way we have a list of people who would be interested that we can build on and email them when these things are coming up, what you're proposing, for instance, is coming up. So there's a way to reach out more directly to them and they can sign up or
Well,
whatever.
we do have news scope or e-news scope, whatever it's called now, which I feel like anybody who signs up for our specific newsletter is already getting that. And then we reach a wider audience, rather than having a separate email that we send out, which can have a small distribution list and maybe one less thing. But yeah, I mean, obviously we would, if we're promoting something, we would use all available channels to put out there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if we were to do it with the library or with the park district potentially too, they would have their own communication channels.
so yeah, but I do think definitely all of the above sort of perspective, or multiple different ways of reaching out is a good thing. So
If we as a commission, either the whole commission or in these subcommittees that we may be creating, have something from the plan that we want to put specific attention to, not specific or not limited to the education component of it, but like how we had done in the past, where plan, each section laid out certain things, and this is something we wanted to tackle. How would that interface with what the staff subgroups are doing? Would, if they've got their plan, which they're supposed to be putting together in the next few weeks, but we have something different that we want to try to push, but we need staff for most things we want to do other than education. We still need staff, but it kind of happens on its own. How do we do that? Will that be well received?
Good question. Sometimes. There's one of our area villages out to the west has been marketing like sporting events and stuff for a while, including like a football bowl game. And I think their motto is something like the builders welcome or builders wanted or something, right? So it's in that vein that I would say the staff would love it if the commission came up with some things that they wanted to work on, and then you worked on them, and we'd say, yeah, commission, go get them. Yeah. Because the staff is going to have some things that we're definitely going to have to do. And as I said, the village manager is pretty energized about, hey, get the work plans done and get them done and quarterly, and let's go. So, yeah, well, I mean, we're interested to know what the commission sees as its priorities. And so we're looking to the commission to identify those priorities. We're also looking for the commission to identify areas where it feels like it can be of assistance to whatever those priorities are. So yeah, we'd like to take those into consideration and integrate those as much as possible. Sure.
Okay, thanks. I'm just trying to gauge how much of our input is, they want or will tolerate.
Well, that might vary by sector leader sometimes. You got some opinionated sector leaders, so I don't know, but yeah. So
I guess there's probably a natural split too, right? Like, I don't know how much how does policy come from staff, or would they want policy changes to come from the commission? How does that?
I think the answer can be either. Sometimes it depends on what it is, right? But you know, a lot of building zoning development related policy, right? A lot of that's going to be, you know, staff driven, or it'll become staff driven very quickly, right? Other stuff, it sort of depends. I don't, you know. So I think the key, if this is the parting thought, I think the key parting thought I would just leave you with is, you know, those of you that haven't had the chance to really dig into the plan, it's dig into the plan. And when we get to the next meeting schedule, if we're not there yet, we need to decide, okay, when's that, call it day of reckoning, going to be for us to sit together and figure out what some of those priorities are from the commission standpoint. So. Okay. And I know, Charlie, you had wanted to talk about the library and some of those workshop things. Have you sort of done it, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, I think it's January 25th is, we're doing a workshop on decarbonization through CUB. So that'll be a presentation on that at the library.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, is there any, is that going to be like an in-person only thing, or is that going to be?
The library says they can do it hybrid, so we'll see.
Because
There
yeah,
will be a link. They'll also, I think the library will publicize it with a link or with a way to register for to attend it via Zoom.
yeah, because I think that format is probably, speaking of reaching out the most people possible. I think obviously that would be another way to sort of do that, obviously.
Yeah, the hybrid meetings, I mean, as we experienced with this, the hybrid meetings obviously have technical limitations, so it has to be set up to work well with that, you know, presentation. I'm hopeful that the library has some experience with that, but as we get closer to the date, we'll find out more detail about that. But the intent is to do a hybrid meeting.
So yeah, just was wondering.
I wasn't sure if we were coming back to anything on the waste subcommittee report, or we pretty much touched everything. Okay. All right, sounds good. Next on our agenda then is public comment. Did we get any public comment?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Rachel Van Hoos, and congratulations on your plan passing, and thank you for all your hard work. I'm a farmer. I tried to dress the part tonight. So currently I volunteer lead the YWCA Evanston North Shore since 2017 from the old shelter Mary Lou's place, if you know it, and the pandemic, demolition and construction of our new facility there. And that garden feeds the residents even when they were housed in hotels over the pandemic. And we have 12-week culinary training programs. Everything's paid for, transportation, uniforms. That's at the Y. And then I also teach at and coordinate at my kids' school and teach a garden club, partner with the Talking Farm. Oh, it's only close. Partner with the Talking Farm. I always try to write them into grants for the gardens and encourage them to be more involved in Skokie, because a lot of things have developed in Evanston over the years where I've done a lot of work volunteering around. And I have a real job too. I worked at Whole Foods Market for 18 years in produce. So I wanted to tell you about Evanston Grows. So those of you on Zoom, bored at home, you can look right now at evanstongrows.org at their website. This group has come up only just in the past year kind of off the tails of one of my partners at the Y, Jean Fies. She would do garden cooking classes with the shelter residents on Mondays. So there's so many, I want to just give you these materials. First of all, December 2nd, this Friday, there's a volunteer opportunity at Eggleston Farm where they're putting a produce washing station in and row covering for the winter. So we actually grow all 4 seasons underneath the snow. And so some of these gardens, like, the Edible Acre has been there across from the high school a long time. But like Fleetwood Jourdain, 16 beds came up. Family Focus was there a long time. Foster Street Ag. There's just an entire network, and they've tied it all up with a bow so neatly and has so much volunteer participation. But they've really only made this program in the past year. So it's not something we have to wait till 2030 to do, to start gardens. It's really easy. It takes dirt and seeds and sunshine and water and a little bit of elbow grease. They also run I brought the September update they wrote because it's the most robust one, right, at like harvest season. So it has their food drop-off locations where they run the community fridges, right? And we have free farmers markets at the Levy Center and at Fleetwood Jourdain. So all of their locations are here. And then all of these opportunities they had, I highlighted the people in here, like Jean Fies, their founder. She kind of brainstormed all this up and got the funding to make everything work together. And then Matt Ryan, who is their lead farmer, formerly of the Talking Farm. So I know when the one girl makes her public comment in the presentations, she brings up the plan and has the volunteer, the education, the make a connection. These are really connections. Like, we just don't have to start from the ground up. I mean, you do have to start from the ground up, but like it's very simple. And sorry, I'm gonna go on and then digress into compost. Part of number 7, which is what I'm talking about, item number 7, is identifying the empty lots. And since we don't have these gardens that have come up over the years, like Evanston, in churches, and actually they're building one at the Vineyard Church they just built. That's huge, but we should like follow the model of the Peterson Garden Project in Chicago, if you're familiar with that. So that took over an empty lot on Peterson. Then that lot became developed and they moved on and took over other lots. And obviously they weren't all on Peterson anymore. They were all over Rogers Park and Edgewater. And that land is in use until, something is developed on it. Similar to the City Farm in Chicago down in Cabrini Green. It was located on the corner there. And then they built a Target there and they moved the farm. So we have actually a lot of empty lots just straight down Oakton at Costner and Oakton, and then the smaller one at Lowell and Oakton. Sarah's Tent has a giant lot on the corner across from McCracken. We do have a vegetable garden at McCracken, and the school garden, I wanted to say, does donate over 500 bags of produce to the Niles Food Pantry and all the different grades and programs that we have going on there. So we really have it going on at our school in particular. But also on the south side of the street across from Crafty Beaver, that building there and the slight acreage, if you had a real program where you had organizations doing education and job training, that from building the beds to growing, ex-cons for community social change, Windy City Harvest, all of these things, like you could house it out of that building and lot. But the last thing I want to say, sorry, because I'll go on forever, is I wanted at the last village meeting, a gentleman came up to comment, Danny Wallenberg, about backyard composting. And he was also frustrated at, where is the education in the schools? What are they teaching the kids? The kids are going to teach us grandparents, right? And I had to go to his house and talk to him, and we're soulmates. So he showed me his compost bins and how impervious they are to rodents in his workshop in the garage. And I want to work with him at the school. But Charlie, at the draft thing, you had mentioned something like a garden box that was, for people's yards, a ready-made sort of pop up and go sort of thing. I do think compost, drop off, pick up isn't the answer for everybody, every family. And we should encourage incentivize backyard composting and come up with like a model of, a prototype that is village approved, 2-compartment, the lid latches and everything that people, even if it's just 1 or 2 houses on each block, especially larger homes with larger meals and more food, that we include backyard composting. Other than that, I want to say I have a ton of resources. I get compost from Midwest Organics Recycling. It's owned by the Crown family. We get it for pennies on the dollar. It's the best stuff in the world. It's used at the Botanic Garden, at the museum campuses, and to grow the best vegetables there are. And seeds for days. Things like this, gardens, though, we do plan early. We plan in January. If we're planning from seed, we start our seeds under lights in February, and ready to go anytime. So thank you. Sorry, that was a super long comment. Does anybody want these from Evanston Groves?
Yeah, do you have extra copies or?
Yeah, they're for you.
Okay.
Whoever wants them.
Can
And
you put your email address on there?
Yes. Oh, I think I left one sitting there.
I
Yeah,
was,
mine is at the top. I wrote my number. You want one?
I didn't want to cut anyone off, but I was going to say, actually, there is some information about backyard composting also on Sustainable Environmental Advisory. Committee.
I just want to apologize. I had a workman in my house, so I was up and down, so I'm here. I'm back.
Okay, that is all we have on our agenda. Let's see if we else had something. Can discuss, in that case, next meeting, which is more of a discussion than normal. So our next meeting, which is the 27th of December. I will be out of town. I don't know how many people will be around then. As Max alluded to, we have our next meeting would be something where we, after having reviewed the plan, start digging in. So we can still meet. I can't be there. Most people can be there, or we should explore other dates. Whatever. I'm out then. So those 2 weeks are when I'm break. Thanks to the strange school coming. I think the 13th of that 2 weeks from now.
Max, what would make most sense, given what you're trying to do?
For me, there's not a difference between the 20th and the 27th, I don't think. I mean, like I said, I'll have a sense of where the sectors are going on the 15th. I'll have and by the 27th, I might have a little bit more insight, which is when you're going to meet, but they're not going to finalize their plans and submit till the 29th. So could still be some things in the air. So, I mean, we can probably have an effective discussion on the 20th as well. So it's really more about what works for you all.
Maybe we can just say if you're available on the 20th or the 27th.
Yeah, let's start with 27. Yeah, I'm good on the 27th. Good on the 27th. Right now, I got
Zoomers, 12/27, yay or nay?
it.
I don't know if it's-
So, Andrew,
Zoom people, are you available on December 27th?
I accidentally sent I didn't send it to everyone, but I guess either or I guess could work. Personally.
Same for me.
That makes sense. We'll have more.
All right.
information.
27th it is. Okay,
All right. That. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, again, a bit of a housekeeping thing. I think I have pretty much this time everyone who's there in person, but since you have a better vantage point, Max, of who is and isn't there, just for the minutes, if you could make sure.
okay,
That way I get it correct.
all right.
Yeah, we did. Yes. All right. That is it.